We've spoken about how Mark wants people to see the shape of discipleship. That is that what discipleship looks like, what disciples experience, lines up with what Jesus experienced, which makes sense. If you're following Jesus, then you're going to experience the things he does. So Jesus experiences suffering, he experiences rejection, and ultimately he experiences glory in resurrection. Time and time again, Jesus says, and will rise again the third day. So there is that promise of resurrection, which is then glory. And so Mark wants to make it clear that a disciple's life will have the same experience. It'll be one that has suffering. It'll be one that has rejection. And for us, you and me, eventual glory. In our passage today, Mark shifts a little bit of that focus. So Jesus takes us from understanding what a disciple's life is going to look like, as in what's going to happen, to what a disciple's life should look like in character and behaviour. So I'm going to read for us. It's Mark 9, and it's 33 to 37. So Mark 9, 33 to 37. They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the road?" But they kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, "Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all." He took a little child whom he placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me." Mark doesn't just want us to understand how we're going to experience life. He wants us to understand how we should live life, what we should be doing. And Mark doesn't actually include the argument. We don't get the argument that they have. We just get Jesus asking them what they were arguing about. Now, Matthew and Luke do tell us that argument. They do have that argument in there. But Mark shows us that it's the disciples who get taught. That time and time again in Mark, here, there's the argument that happens, and then when he's in the house, he talks to the disciples. We see it. Jesus will bring the disciples aside. In Mark, the teaching is for the disciples. There is a divide, there's a distinction between what the people hear and what the disciples hear, the kind of inside group. And that distinction is there because Mark wants to make it very clear that just because you know what Jesus says, the people, doesn't make you a disciple. There is a distinction, there's a difference. And this teaching is the character of a disciple. Now their argument, we already know what their argument is because it's kind of written for us. They didn't want to tell him because they were arguing about who could be the greatest, who could be the best disciple, who could have the most power, who could have the most influence, who could have the highest standing and status. That's the greatest in their mind. Who could be the best and greatest disciple? And it's easy for us to critique, isn't it? It's easy for us to think, man, those disciples, they've got it wrong. Man, they're just way off track. They're not even close to knowing what discipleship's about. But it's how our world works. Our world works on competition. Think about schooling, particularly here in Australia. If you're in high school, no one can have the same score. There's a bell curve. So there's got to be someone who's the best and someone who's the worst. And you actually compete against one another for those positions. In sports, obviously, it's about competition. Whether you're playing games, board games or video games, they're all about competition. Animals compete against each other for food. In friendships, there's competition for who's going to be the best friend. That's kind of the ideal position, isn't it? That's the kind of title you want next to your name is, Michael, best friend. I'm this person's best friend. I'm that person's best friend. I want to be the one who really holds onto that spot of the most trusted, the most talked to, the most important in that person's life. In friendship, in parenting, there's competition. I'm sure that I've heard it, when you might say, oh, well, my child has just started crawling. And they're about the same age as someone else's child, and that person goes, oh, yes, my child started crawling 2 months ago. Automatically, there's the competition. My child is better than yours. And maybe my parenting is better than yours, and I'll let you know that actually I am the better parent. There is competition even in parenting, even in romantic relationships. There is competition for who can be the most important. There is competition for who could be the best cared for. Not necessarily a healthy romantic relationship, but it's there. Competition is everywhere, and it's not inherently evil. It's not. It's a thing that just exists in our world. Now, I like both competitive play, when it's me against somebody else, and cooperative in both sports and video games, board games, that kind of stuff. I enjoy both. But in all honesty, I would still like to be the most valuable player. I still would like to be the best player. If it's in cricket, now I know I'm not the best bowler in my team, but I'd like to be. I do want to be the best bowler. There is competition there, even in my team. Obviously, in the whole kind of cricket competition, I want our team to be the best team, but even in my team, I'd like to be the best. It's just how it is. In video games, even if it's cooperative, I'd still like to be the one with the highest score. I still want to be the most valuable player. I want to be the one who is kind of ranked by the game as the best in the team. That's just there. There is just that competition. It is just something that our world works off. But when it comes to discipleship, it doesn't look like the world's competition. It doesn't look like the rest of the world. Jesus says, whoever wants to be first must be the very last and servant of all. You'll notice that Jesus doesn't actually tell them that they should all be the same, that there is no such thing as the greatest disciple and they shouldn't compete against one another. Jesus instead says, well, fine, you want to be the greatest, this is what it looks like. You want to be the best disciple? Well, it's going to look like humility, and it's going to look like service. And that should be natural to the disciples. That should be something that is just a way they work, because it's in line with how Jesus is. If we as followers of Jesus are to share in his experiences, the suffering, rejection, and eventual glory, then we're also to share in his nature, in his character, which is humility and stooping down and service. He who became nothing, who left his glory in heaven above to hang out with a bunch of people who were his enemies and heal a bunch of people who weren't all that grateful and didn't actually do what was asked of them, and save a whole bunch of people who hated him. That's pretty big. That's definitely stooping down. Lowering ourselves is what disciples must do. And Jesus makes that point really clear, because when he brings the little child and says they need to welcome the little child, it's actually a really big deal. Little children particularly, weren't worthwhile. They weren't precious. They weren't thought of as something that is good, that is worthy, that someone you should listen to and necessarily care for all that much. It's not like necessarily today. So when Jesus says, welcome a child who is at best a second-class human, really, at best, second class, what he's saying is, if you want to be the greatest disciple, then you've got to serve. You've got to be the least. And the example is this child who everyone, the rest of the world, sees as worthless, treat them with worth. Welcome them, give them time, give them honour. And it's not necessarily saying that they're worth more than us. It's saying that we are not worth more than them. There's a big difference there, to say that we are not so important and so spectacular and so powerful and mighty and influential that this little child, this second-class citizen, then isn't worth our time, isn't worth us welcoming someone. We see that in the movies and on TV and stuff like that, where a president will send their kind of staffer to go welcome someone at the airport. I mean, they're not worth my time to go. Very big difference if the president themselves go, because it says that person is worth their time. Mark's challenge for anyone who wants to be a disciple, anyone who wants to be a follower of Jesus, is to be humble. Now, if we want to compete, and actually we should, if we want to compete to be the best disciple, we should want to be the best disciple. That we really should be trying to be the greatest disciple. Now, if we want to do that, what it means is lowering ourselves. It means putting ourselves in a position under others. What Jesus says about what we should be doing, the greatest, is to be a servant of all. It's not a position you can handle if you're doing it out of pride or to have the most influence or power. It's a position where somebody else is more important than you. So if we want to be the greatest disciple, it means taking upon ourselves humility and being humble, willing to be humiliated, willing to be the lowest out of everyone. If we want to be the greatest disciple, then it means that we need to make everyone else better than us. That's essentially what it is. It's not just making ourselves lower. It's not just going, oh, well, I'll just be really down on myself. It's saying that somebody is worth time. It's saying that somebody is worth kind of priority time. It's saying that somebody is worth getting the best seat. getting the best food or getting to eat first. It's giving them the opportunity to speak first, that we hear second. That we hear what they say and speak second. It's about making sure that somebody is treated as more worthy than us. They're not somebody that we kind of overrule. They're not someone we think they don't have any influence. It's about letting others be better than us. If we want to be a disciple, and Jesus says if we want to be the greatest disciple, it means being a servant of all. That is making sure that everyone, absolutely everyone, it's an active thing. They're actively better than us. They're in a better position than us. They're above us. It's not this passive, I'll just let everyone else do whatever. It is actively making sure we serve, we lower ourselves, we provide an opportunity for others to hear praise, that we make sure that others get praised before us, or maybe even instead of us, that others, not us, are put in positions above and beyond.